There's another kind of wrinkle to this, and it's called the Amber Room Curse, which is, I think, is not really like a mystery of where it went, but it's like there's always been this like kind of thing around searching for the Amber Room.
Curses are cool.
That a lot
it's
of people
like the tombs in Egypt.
Yeah, but that people die when they look for it.
Okay.
Like a Russian soldier died in a car accident after he talked to a journalist about the Amber Room. Amber Room hunter, who's a former German soldier who was murdered in a Bavarian forest when he was looking for the Amber, leading up to clues to get to the Amber Room or something like that. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mysterious Pal Show. My name is Chris, and I am joined, as always, by my best pal and your best pal, Jordan.
Hey,
Jordan,
pal.
How are you doing?
Good, pal. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing great. How was your week?
It's all right.
Good.
How about you?
Well, I'll tell you what. I did something this week. I started to watch a show because everybody's like, you have to watch this channel. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, you know what? Fine, I'll try it out because it's not my thing.
But when people start doing it puts the bar so high.
Yeah,
that
but I think
feel like you're automatically be like somewhat disappointed.
This show's like universally known as like one of the best ever made.
Okay.
So I started watching the first season of Breaking Bad.
Oh.
I'm not really into like the crime genre, drugs stuff. Like,
okay,
not really my thing. Just personal reasons. So I'm in the first season. Towards the end, I'm almost through the first season.
All right.
It's not bad. I don't know if I would have liked it as much, as people are claiming that's the best thing ever made, which is fine. I think everybody should like their own stuff, whatever, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm interested to see where it goes because it seems like they're writing a check here in the first season that how do they go further? It's kind of like, it's one of those shows that should have been made. I don't know. Is it one of those shows that should have been like 2 seasons and done, 3 seasons done?
I think, what is it, like 5, 6
no clue.
seasons?
No clue.
It is a good show. But I think the problem with that is that you waited so long to start watching it.
Yeah, they're using flip phones and stuff. So that's why I was like trying to be like, keep in mind that.
Yeah, it gets to the point where like, with something like that, if you wait so long to watch it, and you keep hearing about how good it is, and how it's like considered one of like the best shows of all time, or like crime shows, stuff like that. Like, I feel like you're ultimately like going to be disappointed. Just because there's so much hype around it.
Right.
Like
I don't think I'm disappointed.
Have you still haven't seen Unbreakable?
No. No.
There's a point of contention between you and a friend of ours.
Yes, I know. So I think it is so far good.
Okay.
It's still not my thing. I'm not really into what they're talking about, the subject matter.
Yeah.
Bryan Cranston, a public a national treasure, I would say.
Yes.
For many reasons.
Yeah.
And this is just another reason why.
Malcolm Middle's dad.
Yeah, that's exactly the first reason. Number one. Number two, yes, he's a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm looking forward to getting to the second season. See what they do. It's building. I can see writing's good. Still not my thing. I
think clearly they did something right though. The fact that it is a spinoff that has been hugely successful too. With Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Which I haven't watched yet.
So I don't even think they've introduced Saul yet. Maybe they have.
Okay.
But I think in general, it's not too bad. Not
so
too
you're
bad.
Mostly through the first season?
Most of the way through. I'm towards the end of the first season, I believe. So, I would say that it's no The Americans, which I watched again recently.
Man,
my yearly watch of The Americans, great show.
You turned me on to
show.
that, man. My partner and her and I binge watched the crap out of that show because I remember we were like, dude, you have to watch this. You have to watch this. You have to watch this. Finally, we sat down and watched it. I think we started watching it during the final season. So by the time we got to the final season, like it was already done. But so good.
Yeah. There's a lot of shows like that. They're just like, I love them. I watch them a couple times a year. Not a couple times. I watched like the Dark on Netflix. One of my favorite shows ever. My favorite show ever, Mr. Robot. Still one of the best shows ever made.
Watch that.
One of the best shows ever made. Last season's not too great, but the entire show is amazing. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that type of stuff. Hopefully, we have something more interesting to talk about. Not more interesting than Breaking Bad, I would say to most people. If I say that, we're going to get some comments about I suck.
How dare you?
Yeah. Whatever. So I want to first ask you, Jordan.
Yeah.
Have you ever been gifted a room?
Gifted a room?
Did someone ever say, here's a room? That it's not only that They built it for you. They designed it for you. And they said, here's a room.
Is that like, no, never been a gift room.
Have you ever, have you ever had a room stolen from you?
No.
Okay.
Well, no.
Yeah.
No.
So
I had to share a room once. That was terrible.
Yeah.
With my older brother, though.
Well, of course.
For years, but.
Yeah. It's
how do you gift someone a room?
Great question. We're going to hopefully talk a little bit about that.
All right.
We're going to be asking the question today, where did the Nazis hide the Amber Room?
Oh, okay.
Do you know what the Amber Room is?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know much about it, but I know of it.
You know of it?
Yes. Yeah.
That it was a room and it was stolen.
Yes.
Okay. So we are going to take a turn into World War II, which is filled with tons of mysteries, tons of different stories. Obviously, big turning point in the world on many different things. I love the history of the World War II. I love the things that came after it as far as like history goes. Again, very interested in Cold War Russia as like a thing.
Yeah.
What was going on in the world at the time and how they did stuff is really interesting. Like I always try to get as much information about that as I can because I think it's so interesting.
I mean, the Nazis in general, like it's kind of weird how terrible of a group of people they were, but like people were so fascinated by them.
Yeah. It's because of what happened in the world at that time.
Sure, yeah.
So we're going to be talking about the Amber Room and what happened, where it was, what happened to it, and what could have happened to it. Obviously, it's a mystery, still something that hasn't been found. It was originally created in the early 18th century in Prussia by a German sculptor and a Danish amber artist. It was made, they estimate, from about 6 tons of amber.
6 tons.
6 tons it took to make the room.
Oh my goodness.
Now remember, this room was stolen.
Holy cow.
Still has never been found. They say that it is 590 square feet in size. So quite big.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth, they would say, I'm not sure if this is just because of the cost of amber or if it's like the historical context. I believe it probably doesn't go into the historical context, that it's worth about $500 million today. And if you were to build this today,
$500 million.
$500 million.
Oh my goodness. Is there dinosaur DNA in that? Jurassic Park.
Yes. That'd be awesome if they all had mosquitoes in them, every piece of amber. And this was like, if you've ever seen pictures of it, it's all like sculpted amber, like, worked amber. It wasn't just like blobs of amber they just kind of threw on a wall.
Which is crazy. I feel like amber isn't really delicate.
I would think yes. So the Amber Room was intended in 1701 for the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, Prussia.
Okay.
But it was eventually installed at the Berlin City Palace when it was completed in 1707. It was then gifted from King Frederick William I of Prussia to Peter the Great of Russia in 1716.
Well, that's interesting. Because so you said what was the date on this? Like when they gifted?
1716.
1716. So there was a massive war going on for like 20 years. This might be the latter half at this point, where Russia was at war with Sweden. Sweden was trying to move in more into like Central Europe. What ends up happening at the end of this war is Sweden loses and Russia claims a big swath of European land, which ends up resulting in them starting the Russian Empire. Sorry, what was the year again on this?
1716 is when they gifted it.
1716. So Prussia wasn't part of this war yet.
Well, what is Prussia?
Man.
Like, it's not like today I'm going to take a trip to Prussia.
Yeah, that's what's crazy. Prussia's not even a thing anymore. It's nothing. Like, it was.
Which is insane that countries just kind of go away.
It's disappeared, which is really crazy to think because they were.
In today's world, we don't see this.
Right,
happening.
yeah. They're an incredibly powerful country, massive army. They lasted for about, 400 years. They lasted up until the end of World War II. 1947, they got dissolved.
Oh, so about 40. They were dissolved after World War II.
Following World War II, Prussia's basically Germany.
Oh, okay.
What's ended up happening is during World War II, Prussia kind of gets dissolved into Germany itself. Germany kind of takes over like Prussia's army and all that stuff. Prussia's located in Germany, but it was its own thing. So
was Germany a thing whenever Prussia was around?
Yes and no. They go through a period where like you have Prussia, I think the Holy Roman Empire, which is also kind of Germany. Holy Roman Empire falls apart. You have Germany and then Prussia. They're kind of separate things because Prussia held power at one point in Poland, mostly Germany, and Poland, a little bit of Russia. Really weird. You have this whole weird like timeline of what happens to Prussia, but it's just saying the fact that they're this massive power, massive war machine. So by them having good relations with Russia, that helped Russia end up winning this war against Sweden. So the Russian Empire lasted until about 1917. So they were around for almost 200 years. And then the Bolshevik Revolution happened, which ended up causing the fall of the Russian Empire because the working class kind of basically took over.
And that was their move into...
So it went from Russian Empire starting once they won this war against Sweden with Prussia's help. Mainly, I think they won because Prussia joined this war. Lasted for about 200 years until near the end of World War I. Russia falls apart. The empire falls apart because this big revolution was going on with the Bolsheviks, communism, Marxism, and then they end up
eventually getting to the Soviet Union.
Soviet Union, yeah.
Okay.
They killed off the last of the czars. And
okay,
emperors.
right.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
yes. I was recently listening to something about the czars.
Sorry, I went down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah, it's okay. That's what this entire show is a rabbit hole. So again, going back, the Amber Room was a gift from King Frederick William I of Prussia to Peter the Great of Russia in 1716, symbolizing the strong relationship,
Unity,
alliance.
Yeah. Sure.
So the Amber Room was installed at that point in the Catherine Palace, which is located near St. Petersburg, Russia.
So it's moved multiple times at this point? Is this the third time it's moved, or?
So it was intended to be put in the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, Prussia.
Okay, Prussia, okay.
But eventually was installed in the Berlin City Palace when it was completed. So it took 6 years to be built. Then they installed it in this Berlin City Palace. Then when they gave it over, it was moved to the Catherine Palace, located in near St. Petersburg, which was the summer residency of the royal family.
Right.
The Nazis... at the time that we're talking to, up so 1716, Russia has it. We go up to the World War II.
Yes.
The Nazis were plundering art as they were going. They're going through Europe. They're just kicking ass and just taking everything they can at the same time, kind of behind the scenes. The army's running through. Everybody in the background is just kind of following everything up and stealing everything they can. People stuff. Obviously, doing what they did with the Jewish people, and kind of just
stealing anything of value.
I think the craziest thing about that, one thing that's really interesting about the, obviously there's the intricacies of World War II is vast, but I think it boils down to when you watch these documentaries and you read about the stuff is Europe wasn't ready for a war the way that they were fighting. Like we talked about this before. Yeah. Nazis just kind of were just so fast, and so they were just doing this new type of warfare that was just so quick, and just they had mechanical units, and they
Blitzkrieg.
They were just doing so, and so everybody wasn't powerful enough. They just weren't prepared at all.
Which is crazy because 20 years earlier they lost World War I.
Yeah.
You'd think that they wouldn't be that well organized
or have the materials,
that industrialized. So in a matter of 20 years, they became this massive machine of war.
So this plundering, which a name that gets thrown around associated with this kind of act of plundering all this art and everything. And it was a lot of art. Not only just art from museums, we're talking about art from people's home, art collectors, rich people at the time. Their town gets blown up. Nazis come in, they take all their stuff. Whoever it is, all the art and stuff that's just around that you would see in palaces, in the actual city center, or in the collective art of the city. People that have jewels and everything in their house, those people.
So this is World War II. Nazis come into Soviet Russia, Soviet Union.
At this point, yes.
Yeah.
But in the backstory is the big guy that we're talking about here that's doing a lot of this, kind of in charge of a lot, is Hermann Goering.
Okay. Ooh,
he
all right.
himself took many pieces of art and kind of and artifacts and everything to decorate his many houses throughout Europe. It was this almost kind of an argument between him and Hitler, apparently, from the stories about him and Hitler. They wanted Hitler wanted art because he wanted to build his own art museum back in his hometown in Austria.
Okay.
And Goering was kind of taking stuff on the back end and putting it in his houses. So there was I guess when they would go to his house, Hitler would be like, what is this piece here? You know,
Why
I
is
can
it-
imagine him.
why do
just
you
like,
have this?
Why do you have this?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, famous painting. I
Yeah.
want it back. And so
Well, it's interesting because like eventually, well, at some point during the whole Third Reich thing, Goering was supposed to be Hitler's successor.
yes,
Like he made like a basic kind of made a will, like something happens to me, you'll continue on this Third Reich that we got going here. Didn't work out for him very well.
thankfully.
Yeah. Either of them.
In May 1945, American soldiers discovered this whole train full of art treasures, which is a small part of the looted treasures.
Mm.
And this kind of led off this whole thing of how, of what actually was going on. And this is obviously, and this is May 1945. So 1945. So this is after the fall of Hitler. This is after the fall of the Nazis. So we're kind of fast forwarding right through the war and going. So Nazis are ransacking Europe,
Yeah.
taking everything they can, and they're putting it in their own museums. They're putting it in their own houses. They have all this art and all these artifacts from all these different countries. You know, as we talked about, the vast history of Europe, all that stuff that was in those areas.
Yeah.
That they just took it all. People's treasure, people's jewelry.
Yeah.
I mean, when they put these the Jewish people on trains,
Heirlooms too. Like this is
Yeah.
probably stuff that's been passed down from generation to generation. Like, oh, this is your grandmother's, necklace or
you
your
always
father's
hear-
pocket watch or something like that. Like,
you always hear the stories about like someone smuggled a ring out of in a dog or something. Like they swallowed the rings and they escaped. And
Right.
they, that type of thing. Once the American soldiers discovered this train full of treasures, they kind of begin to realizing that like there's a lot more here we're not seeing. That like this is just this art thing, this artifacts and treasures. They just took it all. They're kind of seeing the value of like or the kind of range of all this stuff happening.
Okay.
And it's kind of, you've ever seen the movie Monuments Men?
sure, yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a lot of what we're talking about here. These American experts and other nations begin to search for these treasures. They find and record 5 million items, of which 4 million were stolen or extorted from their owners. So 5 million individual pieces of art, artifacts, jewelry, gold that were taken from the people that the Nazis blew through their towns.
And 4 million of that was stolen.
4 million of it was
Out of
stolen. So
the
I don't know
5
what the other 1 million was. Was it
Yeah.
like, oh, they bought it? I mean, who knows? Some of these items have been still haven't been found today, including the Amber Room, which is why we're talking about it. Gold was also taken from basically every bank they came across or evacuated from the end of the war. So as they were starting to then retreat from these towns, they were just stealing everything, like all the gold from their banks. And
Okay.
so they're kind of just taking anything they can get their hands
And
on
they're
that's
using,
worth anything.
and they're
just-
using trains to like transport all this stuff.
We'll get into the treasure trains,
Okay,
but yes. So the first kind of one of the first discoveries that kind of realized something was actually going on when it comes to art and artifacts was this train that these American soldiers found that was full of treasures and everything from different museums and stuff,
Okay.
different parts of Europe. Gold was found all over Europe after the war. It was stored in mines, lakes, farmhouses, and anywhere they could find a hole, especially when they were retreating. They really grabbed anything of value, and then gold and stuff like that. The precious metals, they were melting down into bars.
Yeah.
So they were finding trainfuls or minefuls of bars, like lakes. They would find, I think there was a story about a lake that just had they just like dumped a bunch of gold in,
Jeez.
gold bars in, or like, and so eventually they found it
Yeah.
and was like, whoa, look at all this stuff here. And I guess since they melted everything down, it's nearly impossible to actually know what was
Sure. Yeah.
was in there, unless people tell them, hey, my gold ring was in there, whatever. It was being shipped back to Germany too. So British author Ian Sayer, who was one of the resources we used for this episode, he is a author that kind of looked into this for years, for a lot of time. And he wrote a book called Nazi Gold. He found Nazi gold stored in a safety deposit box in Munich.
Okay.
He reported the findings to the U.S. State Department, and it took them 13 years to go in and find it. So not only were these things being stolen and put on trains, especially a lot of the art and artifacts like swords, like from Alexander the Great and stuff like that type of thing. They were then taking gold and money and were putting it into banks. And there's a lot of kind of like people going back and forth and saying like these banks have been holding gold. Like the author of this book, Nazi Gold, saying like there's gold and he even explains like there's gold in these banks all over Europe that's just like in a safety deposit box from the Nazis. And people are still to this day finding out like they're not gonna be able to go in and just take it out.
Yeah, right.
But like they're finding out what's actually going on to like not only return it to the owners or to the country of origin, but like the Nazis.
So the Nazis,
Europe almost was like kind of allowing it almost, or like kind of the banking industry was kind of like helping them in some ways.
Right.
I know it's not as cut and dry as that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these banks didn't really have a choice.
Right. And who knows, like they don't know what's in it.
So, do you think like the Nazis are doing this because they saw like the end was near and they're like, kind of like preparing, like individual people were like preparing?
Probably
like,
soldiers.
Yeah.
Like, we're hiding stuff. Like I stole 2 bars, ran away, threw it in a bank, safety deposit box. Especially in Munich,
right.
You know, so it's not like they're like allowing the Nazis to. This is like their home country, so they're allowing it to happen. Yeah. It's not like they're like a bank that they kind of ran through and they're like, "Hey, can you hang on this for me?" Right? It's not like a Polish bank or something.
Yeah.
There was a train full of treasures from Hungarian Jews that was also discovered or found. It was seized in 1945 by the U.S. Army in Austria. They seized the train carrying 52 boxes of gold and diamonds, 1,560 boxes of silver, gold and cash reserves from a bank, paintings from like important art and stuff from the Hungarian region, which a large part of that treasure disappeared after it was seized by the U.S. Army. This is like one thing that happened where the U.S. Army found this. There's records of it finding this train, and then all of a sudden, it disappears. It took 60 years for the U.S. government to reach a settlement with Hungary to repay back the country for what was taken.
Holy cow.
And obviously, the Hungarian Jews that were on this train, or that was part of this region and all this kind of thing that happened to them. So it was seized, U.S. Army, and that stuff kind of disappeared too, which is kind of strange. There's a lot of this going on. Stuff. So again, gold was found all over Europe. And if we go and look throughout history about like make movies about this, there's plenty of books about this. If you look at like what Ian Sayre says, he says, you know, there was a lot of gold and stuff taken, but it's not hidden somewhere. It's like it is hidden somewhere, but it's very small portions that are hidden in banks and stuff like that. It's like it's not that it's like buried underground.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like there's that story from the 2015 where they found the Nazi treasure train.
Oh yeah.
And it was in, I think, Poland.
Okay. And
they looked at like GPS and they did all this stuff. And then a professor came in and he did all this research and used all these, it was a geologist, I believe, that came in and like looked at what the treasure finders or the treasure hunters found. What they used ground penetrating radar. And they looked at the ground penetrating radar and said, look, this looks like a train because it's right near train tracks. It looks like the train could have went into this hillside. Then they blew up both sides of the hill. And then there's like stories from that era, from the 40s, where you have people that lived in the town as small children. They said, oh, I remember. There's specifically one guy who said he was out one night and he saw this happen where these Nazis were on this train and they kind of drove it into this tunnel. And then he says, you know, that could have been where they blew it up and kind of closed it in. There was a lot of things being put underground whenever the Allies were coming in. Whenever you had the Russians and the Allies kind of converging, they started burying stuff. They started moving underground with a lot of their kind of manufacturing process of manufacturing bombs and planes and stuff. They found tons of these underground manufacturing facilities throughout Europe. Okay. That kind of housed this stuff. So they're like, it's totally possible. There's still people out there searching for this type of stuff. There's plenty of examples. Out there. Yeah. But is it in all one cache? That's what Ian Sayre says it's not. It's spread throughout.
That'd be the smart thing to do to spread it around,
Or that one soldier put in his safety deposit box, another soldier, and they're too scared to go back and get it because they're or they're dead.
Right.
And their family doesn't even know about it. So we're gonna back to the amber room. So in June 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union during World War II. The Soviets removed the art treasures from the castle, Catherine Palace, when the invasion started, but the amber room was too difficult to move because it was a room. It was 560 square feet.
Move a room?
590 square feet, sorry. So what they did was, in this haste to get all the art and everything and the treasures out of this castle, they disguised the wall with paper wallpaper They disguised the room with paper wallpaper, but as the Nazis came in and started looting everything, they found it very easily, obviously.
Behind this paper wall.
Yeah, especially we don't know how good the paper was.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, wallpaper today kind of sucks, but
yeah. So
the Amber Room, go ahead.
I was going to say, so they hit behind wallpaper. All right.
Yes, they hid it in the castle. It was not enough time to move it, disassemble, because they had to take it apart and try to pack it up and move it. The Nazis found it out pretty easily. It was obviously an invaluable treasure. It was a huge part of the kind of Russian Empire, history, and obviously they wanted to destroy. One of the things they wanted to do is destroy the history, so they can control the history, control the story.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why the whole Nazi agenda was to eradicate people that they saw were lesser than,
which was most people apparently.
Yeah. The Germans were here, then you have Slavics and down and down. So the idea of totally eradicating any.
Well, that's what invading armies do.
Yeah,
any throughout history.
Sure, yeah. Any existing people, in order to move on from in order for them to move on and build a society of their own in that country that they're at war with or trying to take over. The idea is you want to eradicate any.
Yeah, throughout history, we see lots of this happening where they go in. Invading armies always destroy the art because that's records of the people that live there.
Yeah.
Their history, they destroy that.
Yes.
Because then you have no way of saying that they're not the bad guys because you have no other way of knowing the story.
Right.
So the Germans come in, they find it, they know how important it was. They want it, obviously they want to take it back to Germany. They dismantle the Amber Room.
Didn't they get some of the amber from Germany? Is that right? At some point,
you mean as far as in present day?
When they know I remember hearing at some point when they were building or doing originally building the room, because it was modern day Prussia, right? Mm-hmm. So wouldn't some of that amber have come from Germany? Maybe they were thinking this is ours. This is really ours. Yeah. This thing happened 250 years ago. This is actually
I guess since it was in Prussia originally, Berlin City.
Yeah, this is our amber.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they can use whatever they,
right.
whatever they want.
Whatever excuse they want. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
So the Germans dismantled the Amber Room 1941 under the pretense of protecting it from potential damage during the war. It was said that it took only 2 days for the Nazi experts to remove the panels. So they obviously had a lot more manpower, not threatened by an invading force, just disassembling this room. They probably had unlimited amount of every soldier in the area to be help me with this.
So yeah, when they did that invasion in 1941, they had, I think, 10 million Nazi soldiers going into Russia.
Okay. So
or in the Soviet Union. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, so they took it all apart, obviously, in 2 days. I believe, when you talk about the people leaving, it wasn't the soldiers in Russia that were really doing this to protect the room. They were not the ones that were gathering everything up. It was these people that worked at this palace that were in charge, these kind of servants or these people that worked there that were the ones that were in charge of getting everything together. So they're not a military force. They're not able to say as a military force, you're doing this. There's no orders. Yeah. So they're not able to say there's probably only a couple of them gathering all this stuff.
I imagine they didn't have much time to do that to begin with. Yeah.
So it's understandable.
The wallpaper.
Yeah. So they carefully packed up the amber panels and transported them to Königsberg, which was East Prussia, but is now Kaliningrad, Russia, where they planned to reconstruct the room as a war trophy. It was stored in Königsberg Castle. So in January 1945, Königsberg was the front lines between it was on the front lines. It was being bombed by the RAF Air Force and the fast-moving Red Army with their powerful artillery. So they were right coming through. This was the front line at this point in January 1945. It is known that the Nazis did load up all their valuable cargo at this point as they were retreating, as we talked about before. They were shipping everything back west to Germany. And the Red Army captured Königsberg in April of 1945. So January, they were on the front lines, and they were captured in April. But the Amber Room was nowhere to be found. I imagine the Russians knew about what was going on with the Amber Room. I imagine while it probably wasn't, it was probably not talked about as like doing this as a specific reason why we're going here, or they may not even known it was there.
Okay.
But they probably knew that like this is a national treasure for us. So they probably weren't. They were probably looking out for it, or maybe they had people involved that were. But at any case, in 1945, the Amber Room was said to be still stored in the castle at Königsberg. But armies invade, the Russians invade. The Amber Room is nowhere to be found. Now, how they knew it was supposed to be there or whatever, maybe there's some POWs.
Yeah.
How do they know it was there? Whatever. In any case, the RAF did bomb the crap out of the castle in this area of artillery. It was a war zone.
Yeah.
At this point, we know it's gone. Still hasn't been found. And we're going to go over some of the theories of what happened to the kind of common theories that people believe is what's going, or what happened to the Amber Room. First theory, that it was on the evacuation ship Wilhelm Gustave, which is a ship. It was packed. Some people believe it was packed aboard this evacuation ship in January 30th, 1945. The ship was sunk by a Soviet submarine in the Baltic Sea.
I think like 9,000 people died on that. It was one of the biggest like single ship deaths or something like that. The amount of people that died on a single ship, yeah. I think it was like 9,000 people or something like that. So
salvage attempts in the 1950s turned up nothing. However, it wasn't known if they couldn't find anything or didn't have the proper gear.
Okay.
So 1950s, we still today can barely get down to the bottom of the ocean in some cases. And this is the Baltic Sea. I know it's not like the middle. It's not like a trench or like one of the deepest parts of the ocean. But 1950s, they're looking for this, and they go check this ship for this Amber Room, which I'd imagine at this point is probably not destroyed completely. If it's at the bottom of the ocean, it's probably still there, or at least remnants of it are there.
Something
would be there. The Amber would still be there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't on it, supposedly. Whether they didn't actually, I mean, there's not like they have robots at this time. I believe they wouldn't have like unmanned submersibles going down there like we have now.
Or even like the gear we have now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like those kind of cartoonish guys with the big metal thing, and there's a guy up top like pumping it. I don't know what they use at this point, but there was no.
Plus, it's a sea, so very deep.
Yes, very deep. The Nazi in charge of this of Königsberg was Erich Koch. He abandoned his post when the Red Army invaded Königsberg, but he was captured in Hamburg in 1949. He died in 1986 in prison, but never said what happened to the Amber Room. And I'm sure at some point they asked him.
I would imagine.
Whether he knew or not, he never answered the question of where it was. He never was able to say anything, or he never told them if he did. He died. At that point, no one knew where it was. Obviously, I would imagine many people had asked him.
You would think, yeah.
Whether he knew or not, it wasn't known. The next theory, which is also the most popular, was it never made it out of Königsberg Castle. Since the RAF pounded the castle, the Air Force pounded the castle, and then the Red Army came in and smashed the crap out of the city with artillery. And so they came in, there's a battle raging, plus their artillery, plus the RAF. Like, there's so much explosions and damage going on that who knows whether they knew it was there or not. I imagine if they wouldn't be destroying it if they knew it was there, or they thought it was there, or could have been there, since it's such like a national treasure.
Yeah. That's war. So you might not be really
maybe
worried
they
about
didn't
something
really.
like that.
Yeah. Soviet investigators say that it was destroyed by fires during these battles. That's what the Soviet investigators say. Although alternatives to this theory is that part of the Amber Room was found safe in the basement of the castle. However, it was used as a Cold War propaganda tool to blame the West for its destruction. They were blaming the RAF Air Force.
Oh, geez. All right.
The Soviets banned anyone from entering the castle and then had it leveled to ruins, completely leveled in 1968. So the castle was still there, but the ruins of the castle were still there to 1968.
Yeah.
And they destroyed it, so there was no evidence. If it was there, there's no evidence.
It's such a weird thing because, like, through the course of World War II, we became allies with the Soviet Union, right? And it's interesting that, like, during the Cold War, they're like, "Oh, it's the West. The West destroyed our thing."
They're using it propaganda.
Yeah.
So maybe they did.
So weird,
find
matter
it, but
of like 20, like not even 20 years, like, How things just kind of flip-flop like that.
Or would they have admitted it from then to now? Obviously not now in our current history what's going on with Russia, but like
right.
10 years ago.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Like World War II, or for the most part, we're allies. We're part of against the Axis power, but then Cold War happens
and stuff.
Cold War happens and like enemies.
Yes.
That's how quickly stuff like that happens, and like that the propaganda then becomes a machine during the Cold War.
Everything becomes a tool to use against the others. Yes, to convince people. Another alternative or another theory is that a salt mine or lake in Germany, that it's in the salt mine or a lake in Germany. In 1997, a set of 4 amber stones were discovered in the possession of a Nazi soldier who helped pack up the amber room in 1941. So he said he helped pack up the amber room. I don't know if that's true. We don't know if that's true. Obviously, he could have been lying. But he had 4 amber stones that he had on him. But I guess they had to figure out for this theory they had to be able to prove that it was from the amber room, or it wouldn't have been news, or it wouldn't have been part of a theory.
Okay.
So
he was a former.
He was a Nazi.
So what would
he said in 1987? He said he helped pack up the amber room, and he had 4 amber stones.
What would push him to admit that though?
Right. Maybe he was on his deathbed.
Yeah.
Maybe it was kind of death, or his family found it. Or yeah. But in any case, 1997, a set of 4 amber stones were discovered in the possession of a Nazi soldier who helped pack up the amber room.
Wow.
Maybe I don't remember if the story was his family found them, maybe after he died, that type of thing.
All right, yeah.
But in any case, they have the stones because these stones were then added to the original, to the new amber room that is currently in Russia.
Okay,
they rebuilt it.
Yeah, all right.
So they added those stones to it. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So obviously they proved that it was from there, but this guy said he helped pack it up in 1991, which would have been was whenever the original packing. So he got those when he originally packed it up. Another theory was the theory of the Nazi treasure trains. Again, we talked earlier about these American soldiers that found a train full of treasure.
It was a very real thing. That was a thing, the Nazi treasure trains, yeah.
Yeah. The amber room could have been put on another train and transported somewhere. It could have been, again, stories about it driven into a tunnel, then a tunnel destroyed on both sides, like in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
In 2015, like we talked about this recently. 2015, 2 guys in Southwest Poland, a town called Valzek, said they found the treasure, as I mentioned earlier, and that it was underneath the ground in this treasure train that was buried.
Okay.
However, there was nothing there. I think I want to say that if you go and look for this, like look this up, like they recently opened up like a tunnel that was there they said was dug by the Nazis. There's other things in the area, and it's kind of like a tourist attraction now. I want to say that.
Oh, wow. All right.
From the satellite images, if you look this up, from the satellite image, it does look like a rail line could have went into this hillside. Like there's not currently a rail line there, but it looked like it could have at one point. The way you see how the rails, because there's rails right next to it.
Yeah.
And it could have been just like a spur that came off there. But why were they using trains like this? And I think this is another part of the Nazi kind of war machine that was really interesting, was they had a fleet of armored trains.
Yeah.
And because Hitler led his war machine
by a train.
Because he wanted to be at the front line.
Yep.
And it was this kind of war, it's kind of this idea of how war is fought, that he needs to be near his soldiers, his frontline soldiers, to tell them what to do. Treasure hunters in 2015 thought they discovered the German armored train, which was used to patrol rail lines. Some of these trains are still missing to this day, though. So some of these trains, these armored trains they used, that they were like basically tanks.
Yeah.
They used to protect Hitler and to move around and to patrol these train lines, these kind of like supply lines and stuff. They have found some, but they still haven't found all of them. So there's still some out there missing. Whether they just kind of like got trashed in Germany and they kind of got, covered up real quick or scrapped before anybody really knew what happened to them.
Yeah. That could, yeah.
Another
missing trains could hold a lot of gold, or an amber room maybe.
Right. Or it's still buried somewhere.
Yeah.
Another speculation is that parts of it was smuggled out of Germany at the end of the world, possibly end up in private collections or museums. So they said it could be parts of it. So it's not even like the whole room. Like they could have cut it up into pieces or broke it apart into pieces, and those pieces could be now in private collections. Whether that's true, who knows? Again,
I mean, I definitely see that being a possibility, though. You get some rich people who are like, oh, I have this memorabilia from World War II.
Yes. I think there's a lot of rich people out there with a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially rich people that probably idolize the Nazis and people that hated the Nazis.
Yeah.
I know Nazi memorabilia or Nazi.
It's insane how much that shit goes for.
But it's also, I know some collectors that are like very big, rich collectors, very big collecting of tons of different types of art. And it's like the one thing they will not touch is anything Nazi related. Because it's such a thing to it that like you're kind of idolizing or like dropping. So like there are a lot of people out there that are like, hell no.
Yeah.
But there are some people that do buy it. And then the last theory that I've found is some believe the Amber Room might still be hidden in Russia, possibly buried, possibly hidden away so that it can prevent capture by invading forces in the future. There's theories that it was never
found by the Nazis.
It was never found by the Nazis. That was like a decoy. That they took a decoy. There's people out there that say that they took a decoy.
Okay.
The Russians may have been too embarrassed, or the Nazis may have been too embarrassed to say that it was a decoy, that it wasn't real, and so they just kind of destroyed the evidence, and that's why no one's ever heard of it. But also, I think by now, the Russians would have been like, the Amber Room's still here,
and
it's been remade. You can go there now in Russia, not right now, but in current history. But it is. You can look up pictures of it. They rebuilt it from scratch. All new amber, they say, except for those 4 pieces that were found have been added to that piece, to that area. And it's recreated, and it's in the same place.
So like that a summer home?
Yes, in the Charlotte. Yes, Charlotte Castle.
Thank you.
So on the, we'll say the mysteriosity scale of mysteriousness, how... And I'm going to say 2 things. We're going to ask 2 questions. Okay. How likely are any of these to being, if you go real to completely bullcrap, what is the most likely? And maybe I should ask, first, what do you think happened to it?
All right. So I'm looking at the same document. I'm trying to scroll to find the theories that you came up with.
Yep.
I did, like, the first thing that popped out at me when you're going through them was that former Nazi soldier had 4 pieces of amber that it was known that they came from the Amber Room. Is that right?
Yes. Because they returned it to the Amber Room when they dedicated the place, or the new Amber Room, because it has been rebuilt. It is there. And
he claimed that he was part of the group that
boxed it all up.
Wow. I mean, that says a lot.
He helped pack up the Amber Room in 1941. Okay. So he was in the palace where it was housed, and he was the one who packed it up. Or he was part of that team. So
that would lead to 2 possible things. Either they actually did get the Amber Room and it's just lost or was broken apart and divvied up amongst people, or the possibility that what they got was a decoy,
which was unlikely.
Right.
Because why would you? Although if you look at like for instance, the Declaration of Independence, I think is a complete copy that's on display in the Capitol in Washington, D.C.
But if it wasn't,
that might be just that movie National Treasure, which is awesome, which is shown between me and another teacher, which I am a teacher in a high school. We show National Treasure and National Treasure 2 as before Christmas break and summer break every year, and it's every class watches it. And then we only have it. We show it in a way that they only can watch the first 3/4 of the movie, and they never see the last quarter of the movie.
Really? Why?
Just to mess with them. So the other teacher's the second one, I do the first one. So then they're always like, we never see the end. And then at the end of the year, we watch just the first 3/4 again.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, I do a lot of dumb crap.
But if it was a decoy that this Nazi soldier was part of packing up,
right,
that the Russians got a hold of again, why would they then display that part of the decoy in their new Amber Room?
Right. That is the big question. Those theories aren't connected.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, wouldn't there be some kind of like science that could be done to determine if that was part of the actual like dating?
Well, obviously, I think they did date it, and so like they did make it a big deal that.
So it actually was part of the actual Amber Room.
Yes.
Is what they're saying. Okay.
That it was definitely part of the Amber Room.
Is it possible they're just saying that?
Maybe as like a good like. It's a mystery. It's always possible.
Sure. Yeah.
Everything's possible.
Yeah.
And I like it. And again.
So I would also say maybe it is a possibility, though, not saying that
there's another kind of wrinkle to this, and it's called the Amber Room curse, which is I think is not really like a mystery of where it went, but it's like there's always been this like kind of thing around searching for the Amber Room.
Curses are cool.
That people, a lot of
people
like
the tombs in Egypt.
Yeah, but that people die when they look for it.
Okay.
Like a Russian soldier died in a car accident after he talked to a journalist about the Amber Room. Amber Room hunter who's a former German soldier who was murdered in a Bavarian forest when he was looking for the Amber, leading up to clues to get to the Amber Room or something like that.
Wow. Okay, I will say this. So I would imagine by this point, maybe the Soviet Union was aware that, Germany's coming. Obviously, they have like, I think 10 million people, but they probably might have been aware also that they were going through and looting, as most, invading countries do when they invade a country. They steal, they plunder. So it's possible that the Soviet Union might have been aware, obviously Germany's here. They may be taking stuff from us. They may be taking like treasures from us, that they could have done a old switcheroo, made a decoy, and possibly the Amber Room is secure somewhere else.
But why would they have not brought it out? Because
what would be the why? I mean, why necessarily would they want to say that we still have the Amber Room? Like, what's the benefit of that?
I guess just to be like, we beat the Nazis. Because there's those stories about like
fools the Nazis, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like like I mean, sure, it would have came out a long time ago,
right?
Like right after the war, they'd be like, no, we were kidding. It's because that's a big punch in the gut to the Nazis, being like, haha, we fooled you.
Yeah. Not that we beat you, but yeah, we like fooled you.
Telling the people, like it's a good story to tell the people of Russia, like, look, they couldn't even defeat us, not on the battlefield, but we outsmarted them in every way.
Yeah.
And we saved our national treasure.
Sure.
Because I'd imagine that like that's kind of the reason why I think it's not hidden in Russia somewhere is because I think it's such a national pride type of thing that like this is our thing that the Nazis, the terrible thing, took from us, and that if we had it hidden the whole time, it's kind of a punch in the face of the people of Russia, I believe.
Yeah,
you'd be like, oh, they weren't really that powerful. Look, we beat them. Like I think it's more harmful to the propaganda. It's better for the propaganda of how great the Soviet Union is if they just said we really
right.
We're better than the Nazis.
All right, so say the Nazis did get hold of this, but they stashed it somewhere. During the fall of the Soviet Union, borders changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, so other countries that were part of the Soviet Union declared independence. Kind of like, I don't know if you heard, like, once the Soviet Union fell, like, all these nuclear warheads that just kind of disappeared.
Yes.
Unaccounted for.
Yes.
Maybe the Amber Room is one of these new, like these, not new, but like at the time, once the Soviet Union fell, maybe the Amber Room was discovered by a former Soviet Union state that's now independent and like, well, this is ours now.
That would,
or just as
why wouldn't they flaunt it at?
Well, I mean, you want to
what's
go
the point
against Russia?
Yeah, you're right. But like, why wouldn't they be like, haha, look what we have?
Yeah,
I'm sure if Ukraine had it, they'd be like, haha, look at this.
That's definitely true now.
Right at this point in history, like they would have been like,
yeah,
they'd have been like, ha, look, you can't even get this from us. They would probably had it. Zelensky would have been sitting in it talking to the world with it in the background if he had it.
Yeah, but maybe like Belarus or something like that. Or Belarus like might have like some farmer might have stumbled upon it, like, oh, this is mine now.
Yeah,
off of one of the train tracks or something like that.
Would you break it up and just sell the amber, or would it be more valuable? Because it says,
I mean, obviously,
$500 million of amber.
That's right. That's a lot of money.
You probably break that up and sell it off.
Yeah, which might explain why some rich people across the world might have parts of this.
Right, and why this? But if a soldier had it, is it possible that a soldier one soldier had it, maybe they just went in there and broke it up into pieces and took it.
Yeah.
Maybe it never made it out of
It's like
the castle.
Yeah.
And they all just like, and that's a theory that's,
It's like a nest
I don't
egg.
think as interesting or as popular because, and why I didn't include it was some people just believe that the Nazis broke it up into pieces.
Yeah.
I think the most common
it's definitely
theory,
possible. Yeah.
For me, the most common theory is the theory that I think is the most interesting is that it still exists. I think the most reasonable answer is that it was probably blown up in Königsberg Castle.
Right.
And it was destroyed with all
force.
the, it was just destroyed.
But
There's people that say that the Nazi soldiers broke it up into little pieces. They all had some pieces. They took it back and they sold it or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's spread throughout the world.
Well, I mean, what do you think?
I think that it was probably blown up.
Yeah.
In the castle. Not as interesting.
I mean, a lot of things were.
Right.
During like these bombardments, like a lot of birth records were lost because at the time churches held a lot of these birth records for things and valuables and stuff like that. So like, it's war, things get blown up.
Right.
So it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and I think the most unlikely is that it was on a ship that was, we talked about.
Yeah.
The ship, and I don't think it was on there because I think at this point they would have found it. There would have been reason to go and look for it again.
Yeah.
Again.
Now with all the technology we have now, yeah.
Right. But like I said, the most popular theory is one I agree with, that it was destroyed in the castle.
Okay.
I'd like to think that it's somewhere in a salt mine in Germany somewhere, or in the bottom of a lake,
right,
waiting to be discovered. But I think for the most part, or that's on a treasure train buried under a mountain somewhere, which would be awesome.
Which would be really cool.
But there's so many examples of these. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of groups out there that are like investigating a lot of these kind of factories and stuff that are hidden underground, like. These kind of, if you look at like all the different factories and things that kind of popped up in 44 and 43 when the Nazis knew things were starting to, the Air Force was starting to get beat down. It could be someone they discovered in one of these tunnels.
Yeah. I would imagine too, like if Nazi soldiers like did come upon it and like they were charged with, removing it, shipping it, its amber was going to be very fragile, right? So it'd probably broken up. I could see them being like, oh, we'll just take a couple pieces for ourselves and in case this war goes south.
What if like
we need something to fall back upon and sell this stuff off for, our families?
What if like, I think this is like there's a movie out there where this scene of like two guys like holding a piece up and they're like, oh, and it just like falls over. It falls over and crashes and they're like, grab or shizer. Yeah. And then they like take off running.
Yeah.
It's kind of like something that'd probably be in like a
National Lampoon movie.
Yeah, something like that. Or what's the other British guy?
Mr. Bean.
That's the great Mr. Bean scene. Mr. Bean goes to the Nazis, yeah.
Takes on like a Mel Brooks movie, probably.
Yes. So I mean, a History of the World Part 2, Part 1. Yeah, I think that would be a funny thing, but I think it's also more than likely been destroyed.
And I think we said this in 2 other episodes, but it's the least, would you say like the least fascinating reason is.
I think I messed that up last episode. It's what the detective said in the piece of media that I was watching was the most likely scenario is 95% of the time what actually happened. He was specifically talking about murders or crimes, but it's like most likely it's what happened. The most likely scenario is what happened because it's the most likely. It's the most common thing that could have happened. What was the most likely thing in this case? It got bombed by the military. It got destroyed by. Maybe it was on a train and they destroyed the train and a fire destroyed. Like there's no remnants of it.
Could have been
nothing left.
One of the armored trains though, but just
they're just sitting out there somewhere. There you have it. Another mystery that we cannot solve, not possible to solve for us. It's two guys sitting in a basement. Two pals sitting in a basement.
Without the means to do so.
So that's the end of our mysterious look into the Amber Room, where the Amber Room went, and where it will be someday possibly pop up again, where it could possibly pop up again someday. In any case, we will be back again next week with another mysterious episode.
Oh, wait, maybe Hitler has it with him in Argentina.
I can't wait to talk about Hitler in his house in Argentina that we found. But in any case, at this episode, we will see you again for another mysterious tale. Jordan, what's going to be the next episode?
You want to talk about this now?
I don't know. Is it a mystery?
Of course it is. We'll be going over, I'm not going to say what it's about, but
it's a mystery.
It's a mystery, conspiracy.
Stay mysterious.
Murder, suicide.
Murder, suicide.
Or assassination.
So at this point, we are still working on getting our website up, all this stuff. If you're listening to this in the far future, which who knows, we may have a website at this point. Please check the show notes. The logo, the YouTube channel, the podcast feeds. If you're listening to us in one of those or seeing this in one of those places, obviously you know that it's already up and ready and running. And we are still expanding and figuring out what we want to do with media and that type of thing, with social media and where we want to go with these in the future. We don't have a logo yet. We're working on it. We hope you tune into the next episode of the Mysterious Pal Show. Jordan, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye, pal.
Bye-bye.